This also this morning from the White House. They fired back at former President Donald Trump over some controversial, at a minimum, comments that he's made about Jewish voters. Listen to what the former president said.
Why do the Democrats hate Bibi Netanyahu?
I actually think they hate Israel.
Yes.
I don't think they hate him. I think they hate Israel. And the Democrat Party hates Israel. Any Jewish person that votes for Democrats hates their religion. They hate everything about Israel, and they should be ashamed of themselves because Israel will be destroyed.
All right, so the Biden campaign was pretty quick to respond to this. They said, quote, "The only person who should be ashamed here is Donald Trump. Donald Trump openly demeans Jewish Americans and reportedly thinks Adolf Hitler did some good things." Our panel's back. Evan Osnos, can you, what Trump had to say here is very incendiary. Can you just dig into why a little bit? Because there are tropes at play here that are pretty ugly.
Yeah, it's very offensive, frankly, to American Jews. I think the idea, on the one hand, that people would hate the state of Israel because they're voicing their opposition to a policy is something that bothers people. Also, the assumption that Jewish identity means support necessarily for Israeli policy is also really bothers people. There's something else going on, too, which is that, Donald Trump is trying to distract attention from the fact that the Biden administration has moved on this issue over the course of the last few months. I mean, if you remember when this began in October, Joe Biden, of course, went and embraced Bibi Netanyahu. But when I saw him in January talking to the president about this question, he said something important. He said, look, the pressure on the Israeli leadership to move against Hamas with every ounce of capacity is real, he said, but it also doesn't mean that it should be continued or that it's right. He was drawing a real line about where he thinks this policy can go and where it shouldn't go. And that's what you're seeing playing out right now.
I think this also underscores how absent Trump has been from the narrative around Israel-Hamas. I mean, there's been a lot of focus on frustration with Biden from the left. We obviously saw the results in Michigan, which people sort of seized on to say, Biden has this really fundamental problem in his coalition. But the fact of the matter is, Trump has largely been quiet and been absent from the narrative. He, popped up to say this incredibly offensive and some would argue hateful thing. He was also asked a few weeks ago about what the IDF should do. He said they should go into Gaza and finish the problem. I mean, as people think about their choices in November and they're contemplating who they want to be leading the United States in this very fraught time, the choice isn't Biden or uncommitted, right? It's Biden or Trump. And so I think, the more you hear Trump sort of voice his honest thoughts here, the better that comparison is for Biden in an admittedly very difficult policy situation for him.
The one comment Trump did make, Evan, was around, he said it was very brief, but he basically said, well, we need to get it done and over with, right? And that read to me as the kind of America first, like no foreign entanglements kind of thing. How do you think that plays here?
Well, it's also unrealistic. This is a classic Trump rhetorical device to say I can cut the Gordian knot in 24 hours by doing some simple magical solution. This is an incredibly hard problem. It requires real expertise about the players on the ground, the people who have been involved in these issues. If it was easy, they would have solved it. And it is a fantasy to imagine that he could do something without really radically violating America's values.
So I also want to touch on, since one of the other comments we've been talking about this week was what Trump had to say yesterday, or over the weekend, we talked about it yesterday, the bloodbath comments. The Biden team quickly turned this around into an ad. I want to show it to you.
Now, if I don't get elected, it's going to be a bloodbath. And it's going to be a bloodbath for the country.
Jews will not replace us!
But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
Tell your supporters now, no matter what, no violence.
And it's going to be a bloodbath.
Stop Trump. So, Evan, this is kind of what they have been telegraphing all along. To Kate's earlier point, Biden's not running against nobody or some generic Republican. That's what he's running against. And that's clearly, Biden is personally motivated by this, which I think you saw when you spoke to the president.
Yeah, it was very noticeable, actually. I think he really finds it almost inconceivable to imagine that Americans want the spirit of violence in our politics. That is a big belief, and it's a bet of a certain kind. He's saying, look, I believe that fundamentally Americans are offended by the idea that we're going to talk about each other in these terms. And I think, look, when Donald Trump is defending his use of bloodbath, when he's parsing the specific context, that probably means it didn't land in the way that is going to be helpful to him.
Yeah. So obviously, this kind of thing is something that his current campaign team wants him to stay away from, right? They've been trying to keep him on the teleprompter. He was off the teleprompter when he said this. And I say current campaign team because Chris LaCivita, Susie Wiles, these kind of pair of, longtime high-level operatives in the Republican Party have really professionalized what's going on. However, Caitlin Polantz, there are reports that the former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort is in discussions to help with the re-election effort. Can you just remind us all of Manafort, what role he played, why he served time? He was pardoned by Donald Trump.
Yeah. Paul Manafort is somebody who's been around Washington a very long time and has a lot of experience, including working for Trump as his campaign chairman in 2016. Not in a vacuum, though, because what we learned about Paul Manafort after the 2016 campaign, he had to resign from that. And then he was prosecuted criminally. He was convicted of tax fraud and having foreign bank accounts that he hadn't disclosed to the federal government. Other fraud charges, and then he admitted to foreign lobbying unregistered for the U.S. with the U.S. government. He admitted to money laundering, and the Mueller investigation, say what you will about how it ended and how Mueller rolled out his findings about Donald Trump, there were very specific findings that they never really got to the bottom of because Paul Manafort ended up lying to prosecutors after cutting a plea deal about how deep his ties were.
How many times do we have to say, just don't lie to the Fed? It's
Yeah.
just a bad plan. Always a bad plan.
But Manafort had, in that time period, ties to a Russian intelligence connected person, operative named Konstantin Kilimnik, a longtime colleague of him.
I haven't heard that name in a while, but yes.
Ukraine and Russia.
Right.
And Manafort was talking to Kilimnik and sharing polling data with him from the Trump campaign. He was also talking to Kilimnik repeatedly about what they called a peace plan at the time and whether Donald Trump would support it. And that peace plan was about the idea of Russia entering Ukraine or invading in some way. And so
And here we are today.
Manafort's ties in Russia, Ukraine, also in the Middle East, there were many different areas. He had a lot of business overseas. That all was something that we never really understood, at least the Justice Department never truly understood the extent of those connections. And he did plead guilty and admitted to many of these.
And then this 2020 intelligence report, Manafort's high-level access and willingness to share information with individuals closely affiliated with Russian intelligence services represented a grave counterintelligence threat.
Sorry, he
Very
was
briefly.
pardoned too. I
Yes,
forgot.
He was pardoned
by Trump.
By Donald Trump. We did not. We do need to underscore that. Again, coming back potentially into the fold on Donald Trump's re-election campaign.